Fuck you, Steve.
You're live.
Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve Boykin, and I'm here in half burnt the fuck out Boulder Creek, California. Joining me is my fantastic co-host. Who's got me up right now? Oh, that might be me. Never mind. Glory, how's it going?
You know, it was going good until Arsenal scored.
We'll pray for Manchester United throughout the course of today's show. All right, thoughts and prayers, and we'll let Man U know that we see them and we hear them.
For fuck's sake!
And see if we've got any more political platitudes we can throw at the Man U squad while we're at it. Joining me and Glory this morning is goddamn it, just one of my favorite people that I just get into the most fun conversations. Please welcome back to the show, attorney, author, and cerebral magnate Jared Beck.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Steve. It's good to meet you, Gloria.
It's good to see you again, my friend. So last night was Thanksgiving, Halloween, and you've got kids. Were you able to take them out trick-or-treating at all?
So for Halloween, we basically pitched a tent in our yard and slept overnight. Actually, okay. I went back into the house, but Elizabeth stayed out there with the kids.
Okay.
So there was no trick-or-treating. Just camping in the yard, you know.
Little full moon.
Yeah.
All Hallows.
I mean, we live in the middle of nowhere, so there's never going to be trick-or-treaters anyway, even in normal times. So.
Yeah. I too live in the middle of nowhere, and traditionally what happens is our downtown area, like that 2.5 blocks, will shut down, and then all of the storefronts pass out candy.
Oh, nice.
But they did not do that this year. They did like a partial limited thing of it. It was kind of dumb. My 8-year-old went to one party. My 9th grader went to a different party over in San Jose, and he actually did get to go trick or treat. When I picked him up, he was like, "Yo, I got rich people candy. It was great."
I love that feeling.
Right.
No candy corns for him, right?
No, man,
freaking good stuff.
High dollar chocolates and full size candy.
Full sized.
Yeah. No, he did say that like the houses that were accepting trick-or-treaters all had like legit full-size candy bars, and that several people told him, "We're making up for our idiot fucking neighbors who are too scared of this shit and locked their house down. So here you go. Take 2. You know?
Nice.
Well, yeah, and Gavin Newsom tried to freaking cancel Halloween or some dumb shit like that, and you know, giving the police an excuse to surveil the whole area. There were like helicopters going around Pasadena last night, which is where I was, and then there were also cops all over the place as well. A group of people that hold like dance protests in West Hollywood, Dance for Black Lives. They tried to do like a Halloween dance, and it was declared unlawful within like 2 minutes. So yeah, COVID.
How's that? Wait, hold up. They declared dancing illegal?
Yeah.
Are they like Episcopalian or something?
Isn't that the plot of Footloose or something?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what Garcetti and Newsom are into, but that's what happens when people let this lockdown just get out of hand.
Where's like Kevin Bacon and Kenny Loggins? They need to step up and
right. You would think. You would think that. I mean, they're close to Pasadena. You know they are. It's their job to sort this shit out. My God, the Baptists have taken over Pasadena and banned dancing.
Not the fun Baptists either. Not the fun ones that you find at Black Church, like the cult ones.
Right. I grew up in central Indiana in a little town called Anderson, and there's a Church of God University that accounts for a disproportionate amount of influence in that town. Well, the church itself does, but there's a large university there. And the entire time I was growing up there, they may have changed this now, I don't know. But as far as the mid 90s, they did not allow dances on campus. You couldn't advertise for a dance on campus. You had to call it a rhythmic activity. I'm not kidding. I'm not making this up. There was posters for rhythmic activities that would take place off campus, and that was a dance. And the amount of mental gymnastics that you have to do in order to get to that point, but still be right with the Lord, is just phenomenal to me. It really is. Like I don't know. It's beyond footloose. It's ridiculous.
Well, we live in a fucking cartoon.
That's
so.
what I keep hearing.
Yeah, that's what you keep saying.
Speaking of living in a fucking cartoon, Jared, we're about to have probably the weirdest election that you and I have ever lived through.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I've lived through too.
Yeah. I mean, we got a head start. Let's be fair.
A little bit of one.
Let's be fair. Jared and I have had a bit of a head start on you, Glory, and as a result, have been subjected to more of these charades. But now it's like the mask has been completely taken off.
Right.
And I would love to hear thoughts and possible predictions on as to what may happen on Tuesday.
Yeah. So the first thing, if you're interested in following, this thing that I guess we call it an election, but it's been a long time since things, our elections have had any resemblance to actual elections that happen in countries that vote for their leaders. But I think the reason for this is that we have a system. It's a lot like the WWF, which I'm not a big fan of the WWF now, but when I was a kid, I used to watch it along with like every other kid. And you've got to keep people entertained. So if you look at the history of the WWF, it just gets more and more ridiculous over time in terms of the plot twists and the narratives and the scripts that they want these fake wrestlers to follow, because you got to keep the audience entertained, right? But if you look at the beginning of the WWF, what was it? I mean, it was a simulation of a wrestling match, not much more than that. You'd have two big guys going at it, and they would, they would do their moves, and one of them would win. And then they kind of turned into these, creatures and characters with backstories and this and that and the other thing. And, nowadays, you got, I haven't watched WWF in a while, but it's a lot different than the old school, WWF, I think, in a lot of ways. It's evolved into something, and even more like
it's a soap opera with occasional violence.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of summing it up. And I think that's kind of what the election is. It's like a soap opera with occasional references to people voting, actually voting. But let's think about this. When does the election actually end and get determined? It gets determined when the networks or the mainstream media say that they can call the state, right? They say, CNN's projections are now that based on all the data we have is that Joe Biden has won California. And so we're calling California. I mean, okay, but they don't do California because California's always like later than everyone else. But let's say, New York, we can now call New York for Joe Biden. In other words, the actual results of the election don't actually depend on people voting and the votes getting counted. They they're determined based on what the when the mainstream media decides to call the election. So honestly, if you want to follow the election and figure out what's going on, you have to turn into like CNN and MSNBC and Fox like right now and check those websites, because they're already going to start calling this thing for, I think they're going to start calling this thing for Biden very, very early. In fact, they're already kind of using that language. If you go to the CNN website right now, you're going to see them talking about how Biden is leading in key states, okay? And they're getting ready to call those states. And this is what makes this election maybe one of the most remarkable phenomenons of all time, is that we're actually going to see an election called before any votes have been counted. That's very much what the mainstream media wants to do. I think we've reached peak fake election with this one, and that's what I would watch people to do. I mean, my prediction is that the narrative is going to prevail. Biden is going to be declared the victor by the mainstream media, no matter what actually happens with people like, filling in ballots or whatever they're doing now. And that's when the fun begins. Either Trump is going to accept it or he's not. He has one of two choices.
Yeah, and you have this situation where you must be like millions or tens of millions of mail-in ballots that are in the process of being counted over the past must be the past month now, and they're also beginning to tally the early votes as well. Right. And it's like we barely know much about the chain of custody for the mail-in ballots, or how right. they're being counted, or if they have the right amount of people doing this. So there's all kinds of shady stuff going in with the mail-in ballots. And I definitely feel like it's going to be a situation where they try to call it as early as possible. Mm-hmm. And they did a small sampling of it in this August primary between Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Jen Perlman, where they declared Debbie the winner before a single vote on election day was even counted, because she somehow got like 40,000 mail-in votes, right. which is basically the same amount that she got in 2018 and 2016. So nothing to see there.
Right. So you're exactly right. I mean, that's exactly the right analysis. And I agree with it 100%. Is that the mail-in ballots, that whole framework gives the media unprecedented discretion to picking winners and losers, because in reality, nothing can actually the truth cannot be figured out, because they've left everything wide open, completely ambiguous, without anybody being responsible for actually, counting up votes and declaring the winner. So it's all based on what the media believes, based on its supposed data in its possession. They did this to Bernie Sanders in 2016. Before the California primary, they declared Hillary Clinton as having gained the nomination. It was a coordinated media effort led by the Associated Press, and it worked perfectly. That's their dry run, at least at the primary level. I think they're going to do it at the general election level. And, that's what I would watch for, though. And I think we're already seeing the language, like you said, they're getting they do it with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I mean, they can do it at this level.
They had Chris Matthews with his fucking giant Tweety Bird looking self in 2016, like screeching on Monday night before a single primary vote in California was cast. Hillary had ran away with the state.
Right.
In 2020, they tried again. They tried to skew the narrative before the polls open.
Right.
And I do think we're going to see this again starting Monday evening. We're going to see a media frenzy where they do everything possible to not just skew the results, because it's not really a controversial statement to say that most of the mail-in votes this time around will be cast by people who are Democrats.
Mhm.
The party itself has been pushing for mail-in balloting for what, 6 months now, pretty hard.
Super hard. And to
Yeah.
people who are like my age as well. So it's not like we need to do a mail-in ballot if we're home and we're healthy. Like we can go and vote in person, yet they're still pushing that 18 to 26 demographic to go and vote by mail, despite knowing that we can vote in person perfectly fine, which I just don't trust.
It gives them a narrative advantage. Go ahead.
I've noticed this too. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And you know, every time I like fire up a video on YouTube, I get an ad like from, you know, Barack Obama or, you know, Michelle Obama or somebody like that telling me, you know, it's my duty as an American to vote, you know, and very serious. And you know, I think they're doing this not so much because they actually care about people voting, but I think they want to create a lot of the impression for anybody who's like turning on their TV or their computer is that voting is just happening all over the frickin' place. Okay, there is so much voting going on. Look, the president keeps telling everybody to vote. That means that people are voting. And so when the media just declares there's just overwhelming data showing that Joe Biden has won this election, it will make sense to you at a subconscious level because you've seen hey Liz, Liz wants to show off our new puppy.
Aww.
Yeah.
Every time you guys are on, she has a different animal to bring into the.
Hi, bud. How are you doing? Okay.
Who's that?
Cute.
That's Subby. He's our new friend.
High five.
Member of the family.
High five.
Okay.
High five, man. High five.
Okay.
High
All right.
five.
All right.
He's such a good boy.
All right.
Such a good boy.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah.
Aww.
I really think that they want you to basically, because the people that are least likely to accept these results are, of course, all the Trump voters, right? They're going to be like, how could this be possible? You know, everybody I know is voting for Trump, and you know, this is all made up. You know, they believe that because, I mean, it's generally true that, like, you know, you and the people you hang out with often tend to vote for the same people. It doesn't really reflect reality. I mean, there is no knowable reality when it comes to who won this election, but they're going to have to get those Trump people to believe that it's not a, you know, that there's possibly some basis. So it's a lot of these ads are, I think, meant to, you know, and they get their ads from the Republicans, although they're not pushing, you know, the mail-in vote, but they have to, it's not that they want people to necessarily vote. They just want to create an atmosphere in which it appears that a lot of people have voted. And so whatever result they push early, probably going to be Biden, it's going to make subconscious sense to people that, oh, well, it's just people, so many people voted for Biden, you know.
And that has an effect in a few different manifestations. One, it does, like you were just saying, it gives, you know, puts Trump supporters on the defensive,
Right.
but at the same time, it's supposed to demoralize them and make them not show up in person at the polls, because in their heads, they're thinking, well, the other team already has this.
Well, that's another thing. Yeah.
I'm not, I need to be at work in an hour.
Right.
There's a 4-hour wait for,
Right.
you know, because maybe it was my party that shut down 80% of the polling stations in my state, but that doesn't enter into the conversation.
Yeah. And you're going to see all the right-wing people are going to fight back by saying, oh, you know, the media is trying to steal the election, you know, go to the polls. What they're not, this is what gets me frustrated about the right. And, you know, and I have, you know, I that's also like the only people I can talk to now because I've been banished to Gab. So, you know, I have only one side of the political spectrum that I'm allowed to.
That's its self-imposed exile, Jared Beck. You can come to Mastodon. There's probably left-leaning people over there.
Yeah, there's not much activity there, though. Unfortunately, it's like actually the funny thing is that, you know, Gab is part of the Fediverse, It's
not
a
anymore.
branch of Mastodon.
They actually,
but Mastodon like disowns Gab and hates Gab because
I think they've switched over to Google Forums as their backend. I think
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think they gave up on the Mastodon integration because everyone banned the shit out of them.
No shit.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, or they're
That's
doing
crazy.
it.
Wow, because I have a couple Mastodon apps on my phone that I access Gab from, and they still seem to work. So maybe it's something that they're in the process of doing.
Yeah,
I know if you go, yeah. Oh,
yeah,
I hadn't heard that.
I'm pretty sure it's in progress. They haven't done it yet. I mean,
Wow,
the problem I've had with Gab is like I've literally had Gab users try to take over my server and send out kitty porn through it and shit. Like it's
Oh, no shit.
There's some fucked up people at Gab, man.
So you run your own, you
Yeah.
have like your own instance or your own
Yep.
server, and okay.
So I mean,
Gotcha.
yeah, it's Mastodon's gotten a little better. It's gotten a little bigger in the last 6 months or so. But yeah,
Okay.
it's so siloed. Like
Yeah.
it's just a different community over there.
Yeah, I mean, Gab is like, I mean, I don't need a lot of people to like talk to that make sense. And you know, obviously Gab is more of a Trump leaning crowd, but the problem is that they all are not. They don't want to admit that the election is out of the hands of anything to do with voting. It's all it's a media driven event, so they don't want to admit that they still think they can vote their way to victory in the same way that the Bernie Sanders supporters thought they could vote their way to victory until I guess now it should be painfully obvious that that's never going to happen. Although I guess there may be still some still burners who are like, "Gonna write them in."
The Bernie Sanders dead enders, Jared, are the saddest sacks that humanity has to offer.
And they hate me worse than anyone, by the way.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, that's why I keep having you back on, man. To be perfectly honest with you, I enjoy talking to you very much, but look, it's one more way to just jab a thumb in the eye of the Bernie Sanders dead enders. Like,
these
hey,
are the guys they call me like a grifter. I'm not the one that like fucking took money out of your pocket for a fake election, buddy. I spent my money trying to get that money back for you, and yet their favorite term of endearment for me is grifter. It's like I don't get
anybody. The grifter, at least for like Rose Twitter and the progressive left. That just means anyone who doesn't agree with me ideologically in lockstep 100%. And nothing else. Like if you actually took them down to a carnival and showed them what a grifter was, they'd be like, "What's Uncle Dan doing here?" Like they just don't fucking know. It's become a nothing word and a nonsense word. I hate it, man.
It's like
Steve, the real hot topic right now is election integrity. That's what everybody's really latching on to now. The moment you want to bring up the fact that you can't vote your way out of this, you just get like instant boom of followers.
Let me give a shout out to the Convo Couch for being election integrity activists, because that's like the only possibly lonelier place you can be on. Both in real life and on the internet is an Assange activist. Like just everybody fucking hates you. Everybody. And yeah, the moment that you're like, I don't think the voting machines are legit, and why is ballot harvesting legal, and why is gerrymandering legal, and how come why is interstate cross-check a thing? And people are like, shut the fuck up. We're vote, do it, vote,
vote our way out of it, Steve. Come on.
Yeah, you can take a broken by design, illegitimate system and make it work for you. Certainly, you can, if you tear it apart and build a different system. But within the framework that we have, there's no reasonable human being that could say, yeah, that's a viable option for a sustainable pathway to a healthy future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard. I mean, we've been. I mean, this is all occurring in the context of the propaganda that's wired us all to believe that voting is the way that it's the engine that makes the government run. So it's hard to let that belief go 100%. I mean, I just see again and again people. I mean, it seems like everybody wants to hold on to this small percentage possibility that everything we see around us is a problem, but the voting system itself has this magical core of integrity that can be accessed if we just try hard enough this time.
If we concentrate and focus our hopes, dreams, and beliefs all into one little physical representation of them, oh Jesus Christ.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, voting is like it's a what's it called? Like it only has one or two options. Either you vote or you don't vote. I mean, there's no voting harder, voting better, you're voting with more concentration. Vote. I mean, you can't do it like that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and
there's no training regimen. No, no.
It's so funny you say that.
But have you guys been getting these ads that say like, after the election's over, your friend and family will be able to see, how you voted, so make sure you do your voting now properly. I've gotten these on YouTube. Very bizarre. It's not clear who they're coming from. Probably the Democratic Party, but there's this very strong impression that they're trying to give, which is that you're going to be shamed and held responsible for whatever outcome happens if you're among this accessible record of people that did not vote in the most important election known to humanity.
Which is just on its face dumb as fuck. I mean, every election since I've been old enough to pay attention has been the most important election in our lifetimes. In every election,
right,
we get the worst president in my lifetime because every president has been the worst president in my lifetime. It's just a succession of shitheels with fucking fascistic tendencies and a 100% allegiance to the national security state. And there's no way you'll ever convince me that voting in the system is the way to change that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the evidence proves you correct.
We did have a question in the chat, Jared, for the people who are just joining us, maybe haven't kept up with you that much, that what happened, the final outcome with the DNC fraud lawsuit, or the DNC fraud lawsuit as of November 1st, 2020.
Yeah, so we just the quick nutshell background on how that case turned out. We filed it originally in the Southern District of Florida as a class action. Very shortly, actually, we filed it before the primary in 2016 was ever decided at the convention. So this was before Philadelphia. We were originally, the district court dismissed us based on what it called a lack of standing to pursue our claims against the Democratic Party. We took that on appeal to the 11th Circuit in Atlanta, which upheld the district court in a long order that unfortunately in my mind cited Alexander de Tocqueville, or Alexis de Tocqueville, as the one of its authorities, which I don't know if I want to go into that now, but one of the sad things about that opinion was it cited Tocqueville. And then we appealed from the 11th Circuit and to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court in 2020, I believe it's June 1st, issued a one-line order saying denied, which it does in like 99% of the cases that get petitioned to the Supreme Court. So it wasn't a huge surprise, although very, very disappointing. I would have at least liked to see the Supreme Court maybe explain some reasoning behind why it chose not to take our appeal, especially since, you know, we have visible breakdowns in democracy and democratic society, like happening all around us to anybody who can see or hear or read or listen to what's going on. So, you know, and that was part of the petition that we made to the Supreme Court, was you have to really consider taking this case very, very strongly, because we think this gets at the heart of why there's a crisis in American democracy. But of course, it fell on deaf ears. I mean, who knows, maybe, you know, Justice Ginsburg wasn't doing so hot when the petition came on her desk or hospital bed or wherever she was, and you know, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt, because we know now that she wasn't in such great shape. But as far as the other justices, you know, I really hope, you know, that they at least read what we wrote and didn't throw it in the trash before. I mean, that's my biggest hope, is at least someone read this before throwing it in the trash, because that's what happens. You know, it's the feeling, you know, we get in the legal system as lawyers, is that, you know, we put a lot of work into cases, and when you bring a case that maybe it's against an entity that's too big to fail, like the DNC, I mean, maybe it just goes into the trash right away because it's not even worth reading. I mean, who's going to enter an order against the DNC in the society for defrauding voters? I mean,
but Jared, the Supreme Court has been handpicked by Donald Trump and George W. Bush, and they're all these conservative, reactionary, fucking, what do they call them, activist judges. And why wouldn't they want to dismantle the second part of the system that legitimizes their own?
You know, that's a great point, and I would often bring that up as the legal team was discussing, you know, where do we go? Do we even appeal this? It's like, look, you know, we've got a conservative majority on the court. I mean, if there's anyone in the world that wants to stick it to the DNC, you'd think it'd be these guys who have, you know, spent their whole lives, you know, cultivating favor with the red team so they can get their, you know, Supreme Court appointment and their federal society. And I mean, here's a chance to call their political opponents, you know, fraudsters in a published opinion based on volumes of evidence. I mean, what could be more of a delicious legal outcome than that? But of course they don't, because in reality, you know, red and blue are the same. I mean, we live in a state of purple, I guess. You know, the Democrats and the Republicans, they have the exact same interests in mind, and in the legal, which is, you know, so it's going to be interesting just to bring things back to the present. I really do think there's going to be a potential to challenge the results, based on all the ambiguity, based on the fact that the MSM is going to call this before election day has even started. You know, so Trump's going to have the option to litigate. I mean, the interesting question is he going to litigate? And if he litigates up to the Supreme Court, are they going to side with Trump? You know, the first, you know, impression is that they will, because it's a big Republican majority. But on the other hand, you know, maybe they won't side with Trump, or maybe he won't take it that far. I don't know. I think the litigation that follows on the heels of the so-called election is going to be very interesting. And quite honestly, the controllers, the national security state controllers who control all this, I mean, they may be looking at this as an opportunity to further delegitimize the court and the court system, the eyes of the people, by putting the Supreme Court on the spot, you know, with this. So we'll see.
Well, the Supreme Court was put on the spot in Bush v. Gore.
Yeah, and they performed, you know, admirably poorly, depending on what side you're on, because they chose, you know, in this ridiculous opinion, they chose the Republicans in a highly partisan decision. And I think that was sort of the, you know, the original moment when a lot of people probably became very disillusioned with the concept of a democratic system in the society buttressed by a impartial rule of law. But now we're getting to the point where I think, well, we'll see. I mean, again, the Supreme Court, it may very well go in that direction again if asked to, or it may go against Trump and just, because honestly, Trump seems to be getting more and more isolated as his kind of own thing apart from the Republicans. I mean, there's been a real effort to kind of portray him as this sui generis.
That's a fantastic word, my friend.
Yeah, just consolidated ball of evil that the society needs to get together and reject on election day, just expel, and then everything will be good.
Yeah, that's what the marketing says. The marketing says that Trump is an aberration.
Exactly.
And the reality is he's passed a boilerplate GOP agenda with the help of the Democrats every single step of the way, unless it was absolutely paramount to their marketing that they show some sort of token resistance. But when it comes to all of the shit that matters, the NDAAs, the military budgets, the even the border wall, the Democrats are there right with them every step of the way. The fast tracking of judges, the appointment of this latest Supreme Court justice. There's and I'd love to get your opinions on her while we're at it.
Wow.
Amy Comey.
I can't remember the middle name either.
I'm pretty sure.
She's a standard Federalist, right winger. I mean, I'm a plaintiff's lawyer. I've been practicing law mostly on behalf of injured plaintiffs since Elizabeth and I started our own firm in 2007. Plaintiffs lawyers know more than anyone else just how much taking away all the hot button issues like abortion and gay marriage and all that stuff. I mean, if you go into like the core economic issues, the Republicans, people like this woman and her ilk have just totally decimated the law and the ability of lawyers like myself to represent injured people or injured employers in class actions and so forth. So I have no real affection for these people. I think she's a rabid Federalist Society right winger who's gonna be a fine tool in that for the corporations, just like all of them. Roberts, Scalia.
This is the argument that I always have with my right-leaning libertarian friends is that, okay, so we can talk to each other because you recognize that the federal government should not be able to run roughshod over people's lives. Why should corporations be able to run roughshod over people's lives? Why does a corporate entity that in most cases is either in bed with or a part of this overarching federal governmental structure have the right to do what you don't want the government to do? And they freeze up and like smoke comes out of their ears and all of a sudden I'm an asshole now. And I just like, but that's it. That's the end of it. There's never that getting over the hump reckoning that, okay, well, trading government masters for corporate masters is a bad trade.
Because you're questioning the integrity of thy holy free market, Steve. That's why. Pretty much. That's why.
Right. Like, it's propaganda that has identified these corporations with the free market.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you would think that even if it's an invisible hand, you would feel it fisting you.
It's not. Actually, it's a very, very visible hand nowadays. That hand is like all over the place and in everyone's face. And I mean, it's I can see that hand everywhere. This invisible hand, that was a great bit of, I mean, they basically took Adam Smith, who describes a society nothing like the government-sponsored corporate command economy that we have now, and they fed into some classic liberal political ideas that talk about the freedom of the individual and so forth, and they brainwashed a lot of people into this form of economic organization, which has nothing to do with classical libertarianism or free market principles. None of that is interesting or important, certainly to any of these judges who have totally dismantled the ability of injured people to seek relief in the courts. So that's my thought on the Supreme Court. I'm not very impressed with how that body has handled itself at least since I've been alive. It just seems to get worse and worse. The people on the court are people that have never litigated a lawsuit in their lives. They don't know.
That is so fucking interesting to me too.
It's terrible. It's sad. It's because they don't have like the experience. I mean, these are people. I mean, if you look at like I remember sometime in like the late 90s, they had to have a guest lecturer come in and show the justices how the internet works. Okay, they gave them like a tutorial. I mean, this is pretty far along in the advancement of the internet. I mean, I was playing around with the early internet as like an 8 or 9 year old, like in our basement. Okay, and these justices.
Yeah, I saw Photoshop Marsha Brady's boobs when I was like 11.
But this is the kind of people that are being asked to make rulings on important laws, and they need someone to actually show them this shit. And I mean, if you're a judge in like a normal court, okay, it doesn't take that many cases before you figure out how the internet works, because it comes up a lot. Whether you're doing criminal cases, whether you're doing, I mean, I'm talking about like the late 90s, commercial cases. I mean, people are using the internet a lot by then. So the fact that they had to have a lecturer come in and like show them the basics should be concerning. But that's the kind of court. I mean, they're very much in a bubble. Now it's a complete Federalist Society bubble with, a couple that don't like the Federalist Society up there. And, I honestly, look, if what happens, I really do think we're headed for a Biden declared victory. I think the Democrats the narrative is that they're going to take back the Senate, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do that. If they want to go fucking pack the court and stick like 50 new people on it, I'll be very, very happy with that as a plaintiff's lawyer, because that like increases the chance that some of these horrible decisions that we've had will get overturned. I mean, it's not going to be great from the perspective of legitimizing our country's institutions, but they're already in the shitter. And that might be one good outcome from all of this, as much as I despise the Democrats at this point in my life for but I don't think they have the nuts to do it, quite honestly. I mean, the one thing that you can, that seems to have been a consistent rule in this red-blue, wrestling match that continually goes on, is that the red team seems a little bit meaner and a little bit stronger than the blue team, which always like falls apart and doesn't do anything. And like the Reds will actually like push through Amy Barnett. The Blues couldn't get Obama's judge appointed. The Blues have the stupid filibuster like handcuffing them. The Reds, they'll get rid of the filibuster when it's good for them, and they'll put the filibuster in place when it's bad for the Blues. They're just a little more ruthless, That seems to be the Democrats' problem in this little show Punch and Judy show that we're given.
I usually liken it to the Harlem Globetrotters and the Washington Generals.
Yeah, there you go.
And like the Generals are out there to make sure that the Globetrotters win. They're out
Yeah.
there to make sure that you know, at the end of the day, it's fucking, and God, dude, so when I was watching the Globetrotters, it was Meadowlark Lemon.
Meadowlark Lemon, yeah, I remember him.
You know, but that was a long ass time ago.
Yeah, but he was the classic. He was like the classic, you know, the clown prince of basketball, right?
Hell yeah. Dude, I seriously, if you want to see a tremendous display of athleticism, go watch some old fucking Globetrotters
Yes.
highlight
I
shit
love
with
those clips
Meadowlark.
so much.
But I mean, yeah, that's who they are. They're the Democrats are the Washington Generals. They're supposed to lose, and they're supposed to like make you feel momentarily sorry for just their god awful performance.
Right.
You know, like, oh well, maybe if we got a different squad in there, they'd do it better.
Right.
Like completely forgetting that they're the Washington Generals and they're supposed to lose. We're like, oh, slap a couple of fresh faces on there and give them some fucking sassy nicknames and a Twitter account. That'll solve everybody's problems. Fuck.
Yeah. It does seem to be set up that way. It does seem to be. I mean, you know, there are. But then again, at the end of the day, you know, let's not give the red team too much credit. I mean, they are as enabling of the system as anyone else. It's just that I think they're a little, you know, their legislative political tactics tend to be just a little more hard and a little more ruthless once they get elected, and they kind of stick with their agenda ruthlessly, whereas, you know, the Democrats are more likely to, you know.
It seems like it. So, at least in my experience, it takes a Democratic administration to pass the most egregiously offensive Republican legislation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what the Democrats do better than the Republicans is they do the shadiest, most nefarious shit in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Republicans are, just fucking dick out all the time, like ready to fucking smack you with it as a fucking show of aggression, show of force. This is what we can do. This is what we will do. And we'll do it right in front of your fucking face. Deal with it, peasant. And the Democrats are much more likely to go well behind your back.
Mm-hmm.
And, like there's so many, you know, the Malcolm X analogy about the fox and the wolf is incredibly apt here. The fact that like the Democrats pretend to be your friends and pretend to be on your side while at the same time, you know, openly engaging in this empire expansion and surveillance state and all of the shit that we just, you know, are every single day out there fighting against, makes them, in my estimation, far more dangerous than the GOP, because the GOP lacks I guess they lack the give a damn to do all of the shit in the dark.
Well, it's easier.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's easier to fight against something that's just like blatant and out in the open. Like when the protest started, you have the stories of like people being kidnapped in like unmarked vans, and now because it's in a Trump administration, it's getting all kinds of attention, and now everybody's watching each other's backs at these protests. Meanwhile, with Obama, you had just these mysterious disappearances of a bunch of Ferguson activists, and like nobody could talk about it. So it's like, yeah, in that sense, the liberal fox is more dangerous than the conservative wolf, because I'd rather at least know like what someone is thinking rather than having them like scheming behind our backs, because that's what the Democrats do, and that's what they do with the surveillance state as we speak.
Have you been watching or reading anything that Whitney Webb has been coming out with in the last week or so, Jared?
I have been looking at some of her reporting. I noticed that she was on your show recently and started talking about Philadelphia as being
And then
in
24
the
hours later,
crosshairs.
Philadelphia went fucking
Right.
crazy.
And
Yeah.
I think
Oh my
she's
God.
good. Yeah, I think that narrative, I think that was seeded very deliberately. And she picked up on that very astutely and made a very good prediction. And I think, that's the interesting thing. If you know what to look for and you're a smart reader of the politics, you can actually make predictions like that are pretty spot on. But you can't be distracted by the performers. You can't let the performers, tug at your emotions and get invested in, Biden versus Trump versus whomever. You've got to, make this, you've got to take emotion out of it and be a cold reader of politics and motives and understanding how the system really works. And then you can do, you can make very, very interesting predictions and, tell people, hey, I'd avoid Philadelphia in the next few weeks because
Or, any major fucking city while we're at it.
Yeah, probably a good idea not to go into the city center.
Glory was telling
anywhere.
me before we went on camera that like downtown LA business owners are already starting to board up windows and shit ahead of Tuesday's election.
Yeah.
And they've ramped up their surveillance as well on protesters. Just recently, LAPD was given new approval to be able to obtain their own footage from their helicopters, which in translation means they have a full green light to go and surveil us some more. And you can literally see the effect. Like, you can't even go to a public gathering without seeing like 5 helicopters and blinking lights and all kinds of shit. I caught myself doing a double take at a fucking star, thinking that it was a helicopter for a second. Like, that's how bad the surveillance in LA is getting.
The reason I brought up Whitney's reporting is because that's the other side of the coin to what we've been talking about for most of the show in terms of what happens Tuesday and the narrative set early and often that Joe Biden is running away with this thing, is that the national security state is buzzing and warning about this 9/11 type event that they've determined will take place on or around Election Day. And it's a complete hacking of our grid. It's all the voting machines get hacked, communications get shut down, the internet gets shut down. Yeah. And if that's the case, as dependent as humanity is on both the internet itself and our phones, that sort of leaves narrative management up to whomever turns the grid back on first or figures out who did the hacks, which is magically going to be Iran, Russia, China, Venezuela, North Korea, and anybody else we don't like.
Yeah, throw in Bolivia too.
Bolivia. Yeah, they just had a legitimate election where.
Yeah, it's interesting. The U.S. our coups don't really work as well as they used to, huh? We pushed out Evo Morales, and they didn't. That puppet government didn't last too long, huh?
Well, because the country was. I mean, you can look, just because U.S. TV says the right party got into power doesn't mean the people on the ground in Bolivia are going to believe that. And those motherfuckers will pick up farm implements and come to your house.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the difference. That shit doesn't happen here.
All these fucking Rose DSA fucks on Twitter saying like, oh, look at Bolivia, they voted out fascism. Why can't we do that here? Yeah, we could do that here if we had free fucking fair elections, but we don't. Second of all, that is incredibly disrespectful to the people of Bolivia and the indigenous people of Bolivia who took to the fucking streets and put their bodies on the line to ensure free and fucking fair elections. And they had all kinds of international observers too. Here, you can't even say, maybe we should check out the chain of custody for those mail-in ballots without getting gaslighted.
You're
by
a right-wing conspiracy
a
theorist.
child with the rest of his name.
Yeah. No, whisper about election integrity and get called a Trump supporter for some weird reason. Like, I still haven't been able to wrap my head around that. You know, we don't have a legitimate electoral process. Well, aren't you happy that Trump's gonna win then? What the fuck?
Yeah,
Right.
how do you make? Well, it's in this case, I think the system's gonna present us with Biden. Because I think Trump was a contracted for heel. They needed a heel for 4 years.
Fuck yeah.
Look, if you had wanted to do the COVID face mask shutdown shit, and I don't know that you could have done it under Hillary Clinton without generating the same like an enormous outcry from small businesses and the typical conservative Republican base. I think they would have been potentially in the streets, but because it was done under Trump and he tweets like angry things at Fauci every so often, that's enough to mollify them. They're like, Trump's fighting for us, and
QAnon plays a huge role in that.
Huge role. Absolutely, and the fact that QAnon, at this stage, I mean, sort of reached a pitched level in the mainstream media coverage. I mean, that shows you that it was a sophisticated, deep state sponsored operation from the beginning. Never would have ended up in getting mainstream coverage if it wasn't. I feel very sorry for the people that feel they have nothing more hopeful to think about than like a magic mystery man, like dropping horoscopes about, how Obama's going to get like beaten up in Guantanamo by the ghost of John McCain's.
Right.
And I feel really bad for those folks, but I do think that people need to the right wing. It's going to have the same kind of reckoning that I guess the left wing had with Bernie Sanders, which is that I think anybody with a good brain in their head at this point is like, this is just fucking bullshit. Like, I may have left political views that line up with what a person like Bernie Sanders like says at times in public or writes down, but in terms of the implementation or pursuit of those views, that has nothing to do with this political system. It's all fiction and farce. I think a lot of people on the left have finally reconciled with this, and you can see that because when Bernie Sanders turns out these days, he doesn't get a lot of people showing up. Okay, he's lost he has his hardcore, still Bernie people, but they're a hardcore. Okay.
Well, and they've also transferred their religious energy into worshiping AOC now. Yeah.
That's true, but I don't think there's that much there. I think it's, your typical celebrity cult in the US. Bernie, I think, did have a moment where he had a national following that was, cutting across age groups, races, religions, geography.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Those things are gone. But
he lost it completely for 2020.
Right.
And it seemed like he was just phoning in that entire fucking campaign.
He's done. He's toast. It's over for him. The right still hasn't gone through that crisis. Because Trump still gets his crowds. He still gets his people that are devoted to him, even if it means believing in a magic man named Q and the hidden white hats. I mean, and people were willing to do that for Bernie too. They were willing to stretch their beliefs into the obviously fantastical realm of unicorns and what did Hillary Clinton call it? Like unicorns and ponies.
Ponies, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, they were saying, "Oh, he's got a 60 chess move to win this convention."
Mhm.
I remember sitting in Philadelphia and people were telling me, Bernie's not done yet.
There's still a pathway.
He was looking at the crowd.
So much 6G chess. Oh my God.
It's very much like the Q myth, though. It's
Yeah.
the same architecture, which is that you have people on the inside that are altruistically working for the common good. They can't reveal themselves, but they do reveal enough so that there's a plan, a discernible plan, if you know where to look.
The Bernie whisperers were just out of fucking hand, working overtime with this, I guess, seeing signals and picking up, being code breakers and shit like that.
Right,
And it just
right.
At some point, you've got to realize that this is a politician who's been politicking for fucking 35, 40 years.
Right.
And in Trump's case, like, okay, he just came onto the political scene, sort of, but he also had a failed run for president in, I think, 2000 and 1996 or 1992 or something like that.
He had a number of them where he actually either ran as on some weird party line or announced for a while and then withdrew his candidacy at some point. And they were pitching this guy hard as a potential presidential candidate at some point in his life, which is why I think Trump was tapped by the deep state very early on to fulfill this role. Probably formally when they gave him The Apprentice in 2004, was that?
Yeah. Yeah, he had a meeting at Trump Tower in like 2002, right after shortly after 9/11.
Yeah, definitely connected with 9/11, definitely connected with the cleanup of 9/11, getting the Patriots back on board.
And it was
operation.
I can't. I'll have to look up again who the principals were at this meeting. But the subject of the meeting was, how do we make you governor of New York? And Trump went, why be governor of New York when I can be president of the United States? And they were like, oh, okay, we'll get on that.
Yeah.
And from 2002 forward, you saw I guess the second rise of his star, to the point to where he was in the audience at the White House press correspondence dinner,
right?
So Barack Obama could, throw shade on him, and they point to that moment, that totally fucking absolutely 100% staged moment, as like, well, this is when Trump decided he was going to run for president so he could undo all of the good things that Barack Obama did for the country, because he's a horrible racist, and that's what horrible racists do. And it's like, dude, it's fucking theater. And it just, every day it's harder and harder to talk to like 90% of the fucking country. It really is. This is why we're going to start the Slow News Day commune in an undisclosed location in undisclosed mountains. And, no, I'm not even kidding, man. Like, I'm out. And it's not that I'm no longer going to fight, and it's not that I'm trying to retire or anything, but I am not going to be anywhere near civilization, on fucking purpose. And while you're here, I want to run this by you. I've got a good friend of mine who goes by the name Benjamin Balderson. He is he's an alchemist and a very, very thoughtful man. And when the wildfires came through and we had to evacuate back in August, we immediately went like one county over, right? Because that's where you evacuate to normally, is pretty close to home. And woke up that morning and couldn't fucking breathe because the smoke was just too thick. It was gross. It sucked. And my buddy Ben had just closed on like 25 acres in southern Humboldt on the side of Murder Mountain.
Murder Mountain.
Yeah, which
I've never been up there.
it's a fairly interesting Netflix series. I don't know, like worth a watch, kind of. But it had got that nickname a couple of decades earlier to the series being released.
Okay.
But it was like, you know, they had clean air.
Yeah.
They had breathable air up there at the time. So we were like, fuck it, we'll go. And we did. And the first night that I got there, we're sitting around, you know, a little campfire action, like just hanging out, trying to decompress a little bit. So why not talk about Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030? Because that's what you do when you're trying to relax, right?
Right, of course.
And he put forth the theory that there aren't enough of us to stop Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030. So let's let him have it. And let's do everything that we can to build up these off-grid communities of rationality and, you know, whatever we can, you know, let's try and make things that help each other, but not rely on whatever's going on in a city to make it possible. And it's starting to sound better and better every day. It really is.
Being self-sustaining.
Well, just letting the cities go to shit, because if you read Agenda 2030, they say these pockets of rural civilization we're going to ignore and basically like let those fucks out in the hills rot, because those sorry bastards won't have access to international travel, or they won't be allowed in these places, in these cities. This is where the whole like immunity passports come into play and whatnot.
Common pass.
Yeah, multi-pass. Yeah. And fucking I think more about it all the time, because I'm more or less in a position right now to where if I wanted to grab a piece of land, I could get approved for a loan for it and go do it. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, from an economic perspective, I say it's good time to actually get a loan if you have access to it, because we're definitely headed for some severe hyperinflation, which means that the value of the dollars you get now or have now are going to be a lot less, say 10 years from now. So you'll be paying back your debt with money that's a lot cheaper. So because hyperinflation is always a good thing for debtors, not for creditors. That's why we're doing it as a nation. That's why we're inviting hyperinflation, because as a nation, we're a nation of debtors. We are in debt to the rest of the world. We've been borrowing very, very heavily to sustain an American lifestyle, which in the long run, I don't think is sustainable given the basis for our economy, okay? Because we've ceased actually making valuable shit and sending it to the rest of the world to buy. We have a credit economy where basically the only thing we make anymore is US dollars.
And weapons.
And weapons, right. And so from a perspective of like, getting dollars now and spending them on something like land, I think it's economically makes a lot of sense. From the perspective of, what do I do with my life as a citizen of a country, knowing what I know about the political system? And this is one of the great questions that, political philosophers have asked since time immemorial, is what's the best life for a human being? How do you discharge your responsibilities as a person to your family, to your community, to your friends, to others in society? How do you be a good citizen? And I think that's actually what's troubling a lot of people right now and making them kind of anxious and difficult to talk to. And, you know, I find people difficult to talk to as well. I mean, you're seeing some people just going off the deep end, doing crazy things. I mean, a lot of people want to get out in the streets and they want to get violent. What's bothering people? I think what's bothering people is that in terms of the moral compass for, you know, how you be a good citizen of the United States. I mean, intuitively, even if they can't articulate, a lot of people know that something is deeply wrong. The old ways of being a good citizen, they're just not there anymore. You know, it's no longer enough to be informed by like reading the newspaper and watching the evening news and saying, oh, I think this candidate's a good candidate and I'm going to be a good citizen and vote for this candidate because I care about my children. It's obviously not, that old template, even if it ever worked, clearly doesn't work now. We've got threats to ourselves, our families that are in some ways hard to define. So I think people are really struggling for ways to organize their lives in a way that psychologically gives them comfort that they're doing the right thing. Even if it might be somewhat futile, that they're actually doing the right thing, because nobody wants to like bang their head against the wall and be like a total fool. Even these people that, you know, are telling you got to vote, most important election ever. They don't want to be like a fool. They don't want to be a patsy. Nobody wants to be like a joke. I mean, who on this earth wants to think of themselves like that? So all this is a way of saying, you know, I think sort of getting back to kind of like withdrawing from the larger societal messaging and getting back to the basics of your life, figuring out what it is you care about in terms of values, who you care about in terms of people that, you know, you admire and you want to encourage and you want to, you know, spend your time around. You got to think about those things, and then you got to come up with a plan and execute it in the reality that we live in, because we're not going to be able to bend this society to our will. There's not going to happen. Okay. I think your friend is exactly right on Agenda 21. I mean, this is a long running plan. You call it what you want. You can call it Agenda 21. You can call it, you know, the promise of globalism, the end state of capitalism, the end state of a, you know, unchecked global technocratically linked economy. I don't care what it is, but you know, it's a train that we're not going to stop. It doesn't mean it's a good thing. It doesn't mean it's coextensive with progress. It doesn't mean that it's all going to blow up and be a big failure, and we're going to end in some kind of horrible middle dark ages on the other side of it that nobody could imagine. But you know, the question of how we deal with it is, for everybody, it's an individual question, I think, and it's time to start thinking maybe more practically and more about self-preservation as opposed to, you know, sort of the armchair political response, which is, you know, I'm going to be a good citizen by voting, you know, which is actually a nothing response. People voted in the Soviet Union for a long, long time, and they would fill out little cards on which they could like talk about their complaints with the government, and they're fascinating to read. I mean, people would fill out these cards and they were pissed. But, you know, things didn't really change until there was an actual economic break in the system. The system economically could not take the next step further, and it broke, you know.
Well, it's interesting that you point out that like emphasis on a bit of self-preservance as well, because like so many times when you hear people explaining like why they're gonna vote for a Joe Biden, it's like, I have to do this for my DACA friends, for my Black friends, for my Chinese friends. And it's like, so you're just gonna use us as a cop-out so you can go vote for a racist, corporatist, imperialist, tulip national security state? Like, like, yeah, maybe not voting for Joe Biden is technically in my interest because, you know, I'm basically under the boot of the police state right now as it is. So why would I want to vote for Joe Biden? And, you know, maybe, and, you know, my self-interest align with a lot of other people's self-interest. So it just so happens to be that way. So, I mean, like, yeah, and it makes no sense as to why people would essentially tokenize others as a way to justify why they're too emotionally immature to just face the facts and say, I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden. I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. I'm not going to empower this like duopoly anymore, especially when it's a rigged system to begin with. So
hang on. Are you telling me, Glory, that
what?
black people don't think as a monolith?
Steve,
Because
you will
I have
not
heard from my
believe-
liberal friends that
there
each
are
and
black
every one of you think the
supporters.
exact same way about this, and that I'm a bad person for asking questions. So I'm trying to wrap my head around that, and I'm finding it a little difficult.
Here's an analogy to help you, Steve. It's like watching the first WrestleMania and saying, I'm gonna root for Andre the Giant over Hulk Hogan because I got to do it for my French friends, okay? Because Andre the Giant is French.
Okay, that's
I
fair.
mean,
That's fair. I remember that
who in
WrestleMania.
France did people in France ever care much about Andre the Giant or feel any connection to this guy? And would their lives be made better because Andre the Giant, you know, if he, I mean, I know he lost, but if he had beaten Hulk Hogan in a fake wrestling match, was that going to help the people of France? No, I mean, this is absurd. Nobody would believe that for a second. It's just pure entertainment, and you know, it gives you a good, you know, if Hulk Hogan's a heel, a face, it gives you a good feeling when Hulk Hogan wins, and if Andre Giant's a heel, it gives you a good feeling when Andre the Giant is beaten. I mean, that's it. That's all that's going on in this election psyop. It's all about feelings, emotions, okay? And you know, I think Glory hit it right on the head. You know, you've got people that they're you know, they're just indulging their own feelings based on how they understand this fake wrestling match, and it's infuriating to people who are familiar with the practical ways in which power operates in this country. Absolutely infuriating, but very hard to like. I mean, have you ever tried to talk like a WWF fan out of their love of the WWF?
I gave up on that like 30 years ago, man.
Can you rat? What if you tell them it's all fake? It's all fake. Those matches are fake. I mean, you know,
they're like, these are athletes who train every single day. They're in peak physical condition, and they go out there for our value. And like, yeah, it is. It's ridiculous. I don't know how much time you have.
I know it's fake, but I like doing it anyway. I like watching it anyway.
Yeah, well, and look, at least wrestling is like kind of enjoyable. Like, I prefer, you know, old school boxing or UFC, but you know, right. I want to watch two dudes fucking smash into each other full speed. Like, you've got options for that. We don't even have options for that politically. That's like, they're just putting the same two fucking wrinkled ass war criminals into the goddamn cage every they might look a little bit different, but it's the exact same personalities. Like the backstories and the character development is weak as shit. And like, I just, oh man, I don't know how much time you have, but before we wrap, I did want to bring up the Great Reset, because this is a narrative that for the last couple of years has been coming out by Professor Klaus Schwab, who's the CEO of the World Economic Forum. And hardly anyone is talking about this. Cory Morningstar has set the standard for reporting on it. And like every week I talk to Cory, and every week, like, we kind of tentatively set a date for her to come on the show, and then every week it doesn't happen. So Invitation's still open, you know. Like I don't know. I don't think it's because we're an inhospitable environment. I'll say that, you know. But I would love to get I would love to get your thoughts or insights, if possible, on the reality that we're all looking at, that on top of all of this election chaos, this fucking mass psyop perpetrated on not just the American people but globally,
Yes.
that wrapped up in all of this, there is a group of people out of the WEF who would like to hijack the rest of the planet and ransom it back to us.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there absolutely. And I think this comes. I think, you know, the shape of our election psyop has a lot to do with that. And I think what we're seeing is a shift in the nature of the oligarchy, which has ruled the U.S. for a long time now. And this often happens throughout history. If people are interested in learning more about like exactly what oligarchy is and how it works, there's a book that I'm reading right now called Oligarchy by a guy named Jeffrey Winters, who's a professor at Northwestern. And it's a pretty good book. Most of it's pretty good. The part on the U.S. I think is complete crap. But he gets a lot right about the history of our oligarchy and how it works, and he puts it together in a very interesting way that I think for people who are just want to really actually know the truth about what our political system is all about, this is the book to read. And it puts it into context, and it'll make you not feel so bad, because you'll realize that oligarchy is probably the most common political system that's existed in human history. So we're actually living in a very common, ordinary political system. So maybe that'll make people feel better. If you feel that you're not like, you know, kind of like you got bad luck by being, you know, born at this time when things seem to be very chaotic, actually, you have the same luck as every other human that's ever been born, because most humans have lived under one type of oligarchy or another. The thing that happens with oligarchies, though, is that, so first of all, how do we define our oligarchy? It's a system that's ruled by people who have amassed huge concentrations of wealth. That's it, okay? What do those people want? Well, what does anybody want if they've amassed a huge pile of coin, right? They want to protect their coin. They don't want anyone else getting at it. So wealth protection by the oligarchs, number one thing that the actual rulers of this country want to do. The problem is that given the technological shifts that we've seen in the 20th century, and you know, Steve, somebody, you know, you were born in the 70s, I was born in the 70s. I mean, we saw this world change from a world with no computers into a world, you know, run by computers. Not to say that there weren't computers before the 70s, but the pervasiveness of computer technology, and then of course the internet, which was this mind-blowing time when everybody in the world became suddenly connected, or the possibility of connection. And I remember when that started to happen, you know, in its early form in the 80s, and I was like a kid that was dialing into bulletin boards and you know, doing all that you know, early chat board kind of stuff, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I didn't, you know, because I, you know, it was just a few years earlier, like, you know, it was like the world of, you know, I mean, yeah, you know, you could pick up a phone and call somebody, but just not that same level of connection that we have today, where we can buy everything online, and we can, you know, you can basically have your entire life online. You can have a full online identity. Okay, and we've reached that point. Why am I saying this? Because with this technological shift, the basis of wealth has changed. The nature of business has changed. And for some oligarchs, That's a very, very profitable thing. And look at all the people that got even more massively wealthy during the shutdown, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that just shows you the basis of their wealth. It's all in the online identity of human beings, whether that's as consumers, whether that's as creators of data that can be mined, what have you. Okay, but that happened practically overnight as far as time's concerned. So it's good for some oligarchs. It's bad for others, though. Okay, the traditional bases of wealth are no longer there. So think about like the hotel industry. Okay, if you own like chains and chains of hotels, okay, the shutdown was a pretty bad time for you because suddenly people stopped traveling. You lost a lot of money. And the people whose wealth is tied up in that kind of wealth, they're oligarchs too, some of them. So there's the tension right there. The tension between sort of the new form of wealth and the old forms of wealth. And that's where oligarchy becomes a very, very messy system, because once the oligarchs or certain oligarchs can no longer depend on the state to protect everybody's wealth through property rights, they tend to start taking matters into their own hands. They become antagonistic towards the state, and they arm themselves again. Okay, and I think that's what we're seeing in terms of this. This great reset is that not all of the people with extraordinary wealth are on board. Okay, they would like to see this this plan and this reset, which I think is, it sort of goes along in this trajectory that we've seen, which is the continual automation of things, the destruction of human driven work, and the creation of automatic work, and this idea that people, the best place for people to be is like sitting at home in front of their computer. I mean, that's the general direction, I think, because I think ultimately there's a desire to probably mine like human brain power in some way and connect it into some large network, because I think that will ultimately be what humans, the valuable parts of human beings as we become more and more automated, right? They're going to mining our data. They're going to soon want to mine our brain power.
Yeah.
Okay. To get to that point, though, they have to have us like stationary and connected. Okay. So they're getting us stationary now. And this is the whole COVID thing. But not everybody's, I mean, this reset, I don't know that it's like preordained so much as an aspiration that's being implemented very, very quickly. And I do believe there are forces opposing it, both within and outside the US, but they tend to be oligarchs that see their wealth dissipating overnight, that's where kind of like the interesting international conflicts are going to be. That's where the domestic, the masses are going to be deployed in these oligarchic civil wars. That's where you have the agitation on the streets, the shock troops being put in place, being paid, so very, very, I wouldn't say that the Great Reset is around the corner. I think that the great conflict before the next stage is around the corner. Whether that turns out to be the Great Reset or whether it turns out to be something else, I don't know if we can say at this point.
I mean, that's fair. It is.
Do you think it's inevitable, Steve? I mean, do you think we're heading towards an inevitable? This is our feelings be damned. This is the end state of progress. People no longer have to go outside and worry about, feeding themselves. You can just stay in your comfortable little box with your brain hooked in to, the interwebs, and your brain power is being mined and you're being sustained, and you have a very free and active, virtual life. You can explore anything with your avatar, while you're sitting here. It's like the Matrix, right?
I think that there's eventual inevitability for that. Whether or not it's going to happen in the timeline that the people who are proponents of this or not remains to be seen. But certainly we're being culturally programmed for a technopoly, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Technopoly, technocracy.
Yeah. Technocratic panopticon, but that doesn't really fit well on a bumper sticker, you know.
Yeah.
But so again, I mean, this kind of comes back to whether or not you know, the conversation that we were having about Agenda 2030 and letting the cities go that route and forming sort of anti-societies in the middle of nowhere, like connection to one another is pivotal for the advancement of humanity.
I agree.
And
well, I don't know that the Agenda 21 people will and maybe your friend had said something about this, but you said something about leaving the rural people alone and not bothering them. I don't know that they'll be upset if people like kind of like take those steps and form these communities outside the technocratic panopticon, as you called it, because I think they're going to say, yeah, I mean, we want to preserve some of that as well, just in case our, you know, technocratic panopticon, you know, blows up or goes down a really bad path. It's probably good to preserve some samples of humanity, like outside the grand experiment, just in case, you know. So I don't know that they'll be so opposed to that. But they're definitely not going to want you disrupting their panopticon, though.
Right.
So they're going to keep a tight eye on where you are, what you're doing. You know, they'll let you have your little fun as long as you're not like, you know, hacking into their freaking, you know, supply lines and fucking shit up, or like, you know, getting into the matrix and telling people to, you know, eat like this red pill. You know, they don't want that. You know, but you can hang out there in your undisclosed mountain.
Right.
Don't allow it.
I mean, anybody that's been talking to me for the last 3 months or so basically knows where we're thinking about heading, which means the surveillance state does as well.
Right.
But I, in terms of whether or not it's an inevitability, no, I do think eventually, yeah, I do, and that fucking scares the shit out of me because I have younger kids, you know, and you do as well.
Yeah.
And the world that they're going to inherit in a decade or so is certainly not the one that we thought we would be passing on to them.
Yeah,
Right.
thanks for that, guys.
You what?
Thanks for that, guys. Really, really appreciate
It's
it.
not Gen X's fault, Glory. Gen X had nothing to do with this. They wouldn't even let us at the table.
Yeah, Gen X is we're an in-between generation. I mean, we sort of you know, the boomers, you know, we're like sort of the older children of the boomers. In some ways we're sort of, I think we may be able to understand them better than the millennials and what, you know, what went bad there. On the other hand, you know, look, our generation is so small. We'll never be in, you know, positions of influence or power in strong enough numbers to ever have any like noticeable effect on the course of humanity. So we're like at the mercy of these two huge generations. And you know, I think we've known that our whole lives. It's why
From like jump, yeah.
from the early stage we were very, very depressed and sullen, unnaturally dark and gloomy and just, you know, cynical. So, you know, we're kind of, you know, I mean, we're good people to know in these times because we've been cynical for a long, long time. I mean, I remember kids being cynical, you know, and moody from a very, very early age.
Fuck yeah.
So I guess the answer is that we may not, these new generations may not, like my kids who are 7 and 9, they may not have the same expectations that other generations had. I mean, it's all a matter of expectations. I mean, if you grow up with a certain view of how things are, then your satisfaction with reality is going to depend on that. If you're, I don't know that they're picking up on a lot of happy vibes. As I mean, their school gets canceled. They're told that there's this horrible disease that's going to kill everyone. They're wearing masks all the time. I mean, this is going to be a pretty gloomy set of people. So they may be very well adapted.
You can't go out. You can't be in groups of more than 5 people.
Exactly.
And then to make everything worse, they still expect us to have our shit together and know what the fuck we're gonna do for our futures, because everything is driven by this hyper careerist bullshit lens.
Right.
And COVID is accelerating all this bullshit. Like everything is going online shopping. You can go to a restaurant now and eat without ever seeing a waiter because it's all online, and it's all fucked pretty much.
Right. And that's, I think, the effects you're describing are all the intended effects of this operation, which is, people, it's a form of, it's a form of weaponry. It's a way of inflicting trauma. It's psychologically, and it's doing a very, very good job. The thing with having, the really young kids is that, as a parent, you do have somewhat of a duty, I think, to shield them from negative energy. And I mean, if you can, create safe spaces for your kids in which they can just kind of run around and have fun and be a kid, in spite of what's going on. I'm very frank with my kids about the fucked up nature of political reality. I try to explain it in ways that they can relate to. It's not always easy, but I think they get the hint more or less. And so I'm what type of leadership we're going to see and how they're going to react to this reality that we're describing in this progression. I mean, it's an open question. They might take to it very, very well. They might be very fluid in it. They might be very productive in it. They might rebel against it. That's really going to be their generation's call when they reach of age. I mean, we definitely haven't seen, what the millennial reaction is going to be to the world that they've inherited. But I would expect some violence.
Yeah.
I mean, based on the way things are going, I think we're at the beginning of a violent era, generally speaking, because I think when you just take things away from people, I mean, you take away their ability to go outside and socialize with their friends. That's the most basic thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and people don't realize just how non-violent really the last 20, 25 years have been. If you read a factual accounting of American history, this has been one of the least violent periods we've ever experienced. And yet we go try being a protester and you'll be like, you're full of shit, Steve. And no, it's still, we've always kicked the heads of protesters in. That's what America does. If you turn out into the street en masse to voice your opposition to what your government is doing, your government unleashes its goon squad to go beat the fuck out of you.
I mean, that's how our country was born. I mean, we had, you should read the accounts of Boston right before, around the Boston Massacre. I mean, Sam Adams, it's very interesting, was going all over Boston at that time, trying to instigate people to like throw shit at the British and, you know, get a reaction from them, because the interests behind the American Revolution were very much in the interest of having a popular uprising against the visible manifestation of British power in the streets. And I think it's the same exact dynamic to this day. And that's what's going on.
Well, we've been going here for just shy of 2 hours, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap here. But I would love, Jared, for you to give some final thoughts and let people know what you got going. Are you writing another book now?
I've been we've been kind of throwing ourselves back into our legal practice because I feel, I like being a lawyer. I mean, as aggravating as the DNC case was, as upsetting it was when, Seth Rich got bumped off and Sean Lucas dropped dead, and, the fact that we got, kicked out at every level of the court system, and that the fact that, I'm public enemy #1 to the Still Burner crowd, and I still get all kinds of shit mail from them. I still like being a lawyer. And actually, I didn't like the DNC case so much because it was on behalf of so many people. I do like cases that are where you actually, the clients are sitting right in front of you, and you can, actually put money in their pocket and get them compensated for injuries that have been done to them. So we've been throwing ourselves back into the lawsuit. I mean, we've been getting pretty busy. I think people are sitting at home, and some people are starting to think of, hey, maybe that lawsuit I always wanted to file, now's a good time to do it because there's nothing else to do. So we've been getting a lot of calls. So we've been pretty busy here, with the practice. At some point, I would like to write a sequel to What Happened to Bernie Sanders, but I think I have to do more research and understanding. The Beatles psyop is something that, I only became familiar with a couple of years ago, and it really was mind-blowing for me at the level of like 9/11 and that type of level of and the moon landing being the other one. I think there's 3 grand psyops in 20th century America that the American people are going to need to come to terms with at some point. As I would say, even as a condition of like saving the idea of America, and those are the Kennedy assassination, the 9/11, and the Beatles. I truly believe that. Oh, and the moon landing. So it's actually 4. It's 4 grand psyops. Okay, and once we solve and not solve the mystery, but reveal the truth and soak in the truth and the consequences of those 4 grand psyops, I think we were going to heal. We'll be on the road to healing as a people. And I'm talking about the late modern American person that's hurting right now, whether it's on the left or the right or in between or has no political identity. I mean, there's anxiety in the air. There's the feeling that something's not right, and it's all a result of these psychological operations that were performed on us and our parents by the deep state, the government, and so forth. So that's
would you be into, like, here in a month or so coming back on and doing a show just about that?
I'd love to. I'd love to. I love your show. I love the conversations we have, because I feel like you do a great job of allowing the conversation to flow freely in the direction it wants to go, which isn't always the case. And I've done a lot of interviews with a lot of folks, and you know, it's hard to find people that don't have really specific agendas that at some point, you know, that it moves a conversation in a certain direction. But I feel like we don't have that here, so it allows the, you know, the truth of the conversation to be advanced. So I love going on this show, man. Anytime you want, be happy to do it.
I'm actually not trying to brag here, but it's gonna sound like it.
Go ahead, man.
But no, Whitney has told me more or less the same thing, that she loves doing this show because it's not getting the same 6 questions every single time she goes on somebody else's show, and there's like, I guess the lack of format that we have here
Right.
allows for just, you know, more real conversation as opposed to a structured one that you know, has a beginning, middle, and end, and there's very specific points that need to get out, and some sort of like overarching well, you say agenda to it. If there's an agenda to this show, it's to get people to think for themselves. You know, but
well, this is how you do it right here. You allow people to say what's on their mind, and you know, allow people to respond to that. You know, I mean, it's not like thinking for yourself is not a, you know, it's not a magical. It's almost weird to have to kind of explain what that means. You know what I'm saying? I feel like it's something that's maybe people don't know how to. It probably felt weird for people when they, you know, first had to like give lessons to people how to fish and stuff. It's like, you don't know how to fish, you don't know how to, you know, I mean, you know, nowadays, you know, people don't know how to cook, and they don't know how to like tie their shoes or whatever. I don't know,
right?
But, you know, you have these skills that, you know, they wither and die because humanity no longer needs them. And maybe thinking for yourself is one of these lost art forms. It'll be up there with like calligraphy, and you know, spear fishing.
Fantastic. Glory, what you got?
Yeah, everything's gone to shite. Our elections are a sham, but it was great to have you on, Jared. And we'll keep doing our thing and keep exposing people to what's real. Because this horse race is a whole shit show that's trying to distract people from the real issues. And there's no bullshit here. So that's what I'll say. And fucking Manchester United lost to Arsenal. I'm pissed about that. So yeah.
Well, thank you for holding that in.
You did very well.
Oh fuck, Sleepy Josh.
What's
Thoughts?
up? Fascinating conversation as usual, Jared.
Oh, it's great to be here.
I want to hear more about the moon stuff next time you're on, because I'm so not familiar with that.
It's the best documentary in the meantime is a funny thing happened on the way to the moon by a guy named Bart Sibrel, who's you know, he's the same guy that like Buzz Aldrin punched in the face once.
I remember that.
And I think his he did like a updated version of the documentary, or maybe it was called Astronauts Gone Wild. That's the sequel. So if you watch both of those, I mean, it's probably the best presentation of the you know, the shenanigans that the Apollo missions were all, you know, involved. I mean, the complete fraud. I mean, the perpetration of a myth that these missions went to the moon when they didn't, and the fact that NASA now tells us that they, you know, lost all the tapes of all the data that was used, that was collected in these missions, so you can't even, look at the data, which is, a remarkable thing for them to say. And they've also admitted publicly that they can't go through the Van Allen belts because it's an area of high radiation that would fry any electrical equipment. There's the moon theory. I mean, you can go very, very deep with it, or you can do a more cursory political look at it. But I think all four of those psyops I mentioned have something very, very big in common. I mean, I'd be happy on a subsequent show to go through that, because I really do enjoy engaging on these ideas with folks that are open-minded, and because that's when you learn, and you learn about other things that may have connections, and picture, like a puzzle, gets a little clearer because you're able to put another piece in. So
Awesome.
Hell yeah. We'll set that up after we wrap. And that's gonna do it for today's episode of Slow News Day. I will be back, and perhaps Gloria will join me for our Sunday afternoon Rockfin exclusive. I as yet don't have a guest for that, so I may round up a handful of news stories and we'll just dissect those. And yeah, fuck it. I'd love you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for being a part of the show. Thanks to Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos, and for coming up with some kick-ass graphics.
Woo!
Thank you.
I'm going to issue an open call to artists. I would like new artwork for this show, and we need to turn Gloria into a cartoon for branding purposes. So if you are artistically inclined, the email is spsnd@proton. And I would love to, in some way, shape, or form, compensate you. So send me some shit. Let's get weird with it. Just immense thanks to you, Jared, and please pass along my appreciation for your lovely wife.
absolutely.
We'll catch you guys. Hopefully, we'll catch you guys this afternoon on Rockfin. If not, Free Assange Vigil on Tuesday.
Are we gonna have to move that?
We're gonna have to, oh, that's right. I keep saying that. Yeah, we're not doing a vigil on Tuesday because it's election day, and fucking everybody's attention is gonna be somewhere else. So we'll probably do that Wednesday. On Thursday, Robbie Yeager is going to join us, which is always a fantastic time because he is a financial researcher extraordinaire. Not sure who we're gonna, pick on this time. Funny, the last time Robbie was on, we exposed a lot of the funding behind the Intercept, and just this week, we had Glenn Greenwald finally seeing the light and departing from the Intercept, an organization he founded, and became a victim of its censorship. So I look forward to chatting with Robbie again. Those are always good talks, even though they're horrifying. And until then, guys, fuck, man, good luck to us all.